Hello, and welcome to the 2017 City of Riverside City Council debates. My name is Damian O'Farrell, and I'm the president of the Raincross Group. The Raincross Group maintains a vision for the City of Riverside as a city with a strong, vibrant economy and a quality of life that is second to none. This depends upon elected and appointed leaders who demonstrate strong leadership by the way of effective government, vision, transparency, and political courage. This also depends upon citizens remaining informed and engaged in the civic process, supporting our leaders as well as holding them accountable, and each doing our part to contribute to our well-being. And we have 3 seats on the City Council that are up for election this June. These seats are those that represent Wards 2, 4, and 6. To this end, the Raincross Group is proud to co-sponsor the 2017 City Council debates along with the Pitt Group, the Press Enterprise, and Charter Communications. It's our hope that these debates will help you make an informed decision based on an understanding of each candidate's qualifications, visions, and plans. Our moderator for the debate will be Brad Pomerance, popular host of Charter Local Edition. A recording will be available through Charter's Community Access channel as well as the Raincross Group's website for your review and to share with your neighbors. Remember, this June's election is through a mail-in ballot, so please don't forget to vote before June 6th, and then stay engaged. Thank you for joining us, and please enjoy the debates.
Thank you so much, Damian. Yes, my name is Brad Pomerance. I am your host today for the 2017 Raincross Riverside City Council debates. We planned on speaking with the candidates for Ward 6. There are 2 candidates, but one of the candidates decided not to join us. Rafael Elizalde had agreed to participate in the debate as late as yesterday. We received a telephone call just a few moments ago from his campaign manager indicating he would not be in attendance. But with us today is the incumbent council member. His name is Jim Perry. He has represented Ward 6 for the last four years. The election will be held on June 6th. But this election is a bit unique. It is an all mail-in election. You must mail in your ballot and it must be postmarked by June 6th. Although you can drop off ballots at designated sites. Of course, our sponsors for today's debate are the Raincross Group, the Press Enterprise, the Pitt Group, and Charter Communications. And we also want to thank the valuable contributions of the Neighborhood Alliance and the group for giving feedback on the questions. Mr. Perry, we thank you so much for joining us today. It's just you and I, and why don't we get right into it? Why don't we start very simply, if you can, please list your top 3 priorities for Ward 6.
Well, I think when it comes to priorities, I think we need to first start with what's happening citywide. I think we need to talk about Measure Z.
We will.
We need to talk about homelessness.
We will.
And we need to talk about poverty.
We will. So is that a fair way of saying those are your priorities, homelessness, Measure Z, and poverty?
Yes, and public safety. And public safety encompasses all of that.
Okay, well, why don't we jump to Measure Z?
Sure.
Because Measure Z was passed by the voters of the City of Riverside in November. A 1-cent sales tax, quite generous of the voters to do that. And what's interesting about Measure Z is it was written in such a way so there aren't specific dictates on how to spend the money. If you did that, you would have needed 2/3, but you got 50% plus 1, meaning that's what you needed. And so we do know, sir, that there is a Citizens Commission that is looking into how the money should be spent. Police and fire, we know, are priorities, but what else are priorities for Jim Perry?
For the residents of Ward 6, when this passed when it went into effect April 1st,
Right.
And when we start collecting and start providing services, my constituents need to see, touch, and feel the services they are going to be receiving. Number 1 is police officers. Public safety, that's going to be the top one, and I think that's going to be the easiest for the council. Right now, we're down 50, 55 officers, and if things go the direction we hope they will, we'll have the ability to hire 50 to 55 officers over the next couple years.
I want to interrupt and ask you about why you believe that is important, especially given that you spent your career as a police officer.
Yes, we're down that many officers, and we're getting to the point where our officers and our shifts are running with minimum staffing.
I see.
These guys are running from call to call to call, and we have to have more officers to where we're not getting calls or concerns about the service that's being provided, but the amount of time that it's taking to get there. And we have to cut down on that time.
Okay, so police officers, you think that's easily done. What else? What do you believe should be the priority when spending Measure Z funds?
We are also in need, especially in Ward 6 and Ward 7, I'll just say the entire west side, we need more street work. We've had the ability in my last 3 years, I've had the ability to get the funding for $14 million for street paving, but that's going to be a drop in the bucket, to be honest with you. I have a lot of streets that are in very poor to terrible conditions. I have streets that dirt roads almost look better than some of the pavement. So that's going to be a priority for me, to be able to obtain more funding so I can improve our neighborhoods.
Let me dig deep into that. As you know, the state of California passed an increase in the gas tax. And that money is intended to go for roads and bridges, metaphorically speaking. Given that Riverside has Measure Z, is there a way for Riverside, and would you work for Riverside, to try to leverage Measure Z dollars to get even more money from this new gas tax for road repairs?
That's a great idea, and that's something we need to follow through on. We haven't really had a discussion on how that funding is going to affect us. It's badly needed. We could use this throughout the entire city, especially at a time when we're reevaluating how we're actually going to evaluate and prioritize our streets that are in need of repaving.
And as you know, to get 2/3 vote for anything is difficult. That's what was needed to pass the legislation in Sacramento. For better or for worse, State Senator Richard Roth and Assemblywoman Sabrina Cervantes, both Democrats of Riverside, they were able to get additional funds for Riverside. And I think there's about $400 million coming specifically to this area, in addition to what may come down through other formulas. How do you plan to work with either the Senator, the Assemblywoman, the state, to make sure that dedicated $400 million gets to Ward 6, or at least part of it?
We need to meet on a regular basis, and both the Senator and the Assemblywoman have been very good on outreach and getting input from council members. I applaud them on that. It's something I think is very important and vital as we move forward, so we can properly prioritize both at the state and local level on the direction we need to go for these items that we're badly in need of.
Okay, so you said police, you said roads and bridges, metaphorically speaking. Where else should Measure Z funds go?
Now, I need to emphasize that no final decisions have been made. That should be next month.
What are your priorities?
But we have this opportunity. We have 2,500 employees. We have to provide retirement benefits. So we have the pension obligation bonds. We have an opportunity. We may not be able to pay off all of them, but we have an opportunity to cut deeply into that debt. Now, we're on schedule with all of our payments, but basically all we're doing at this point is paying interest. And what we need to do is kind of very similar to buying a house. We need to start paying down on the principal.
Right. So let me ask you then about pension costs, which continue to spike. Do you believe, and I know it's not your decision alone, it's not even the whole, it's a collective decision, but do you believe that Measure Z funds, or at least a portion of them, should go toward pension costs, either to pay down or for future pension costs?
I'd like to see both, where we can pay it down, get it in the future as well. But we've also reached agreements with all of our bargaining, almost all of our bargaining units, and employees now are actually having to pay more into their pension plans, which is going to help tremendously.
Let us say, hypothetically, that the Citizens Advisory Committee sets priorities for Measure Z funds that may be different than yours. How would you approach that?
That's the beauty of having this play out in public.
Okay.
You know, none of this is going to be behind closed doors. There is a meeting scheduled for the first week of May. We will hear some input from them. The council will have an opportunity to listen to their suggestions, listen to their recommendations, get some input from the public that show up, be able to share this information with our constituents, get some feedback so we can make some very well qualified decisions later on.
You mentioned homelessness, and I know that the council is already looking at trying to create solutions relating to the homeless crisis. Generally speaking, what I have found is that cities can build, whereas counties will provide the services. I'm not sure if that's a formula that would apply here, but does Measure Z play into the homeless crisis in any way? Should we be dedicating Measure Z funds for homelessness?
I'm interested to see what comes from the committee, because when we had a meeting on this in January, I specifically brought up the homeless issue. That was part of the campaign for passing Measure Z, was the homeless issue. So that needs to be part of the discussion. We've already listened to some plans. There's some alternatives on the board. There's some grant funding that we're going to be receiving in addition to the Home First and the No Place Like Home funding coming down to the state. We have to ensure that we get our proper amount of that funding to be effective.
Now, arguably, Ward 6, when compared to other wards, does not have the same amount of funding dedicated to parks, to libraries. One could argue that Ward 6 deserves more parks and libraries. What do you think of that view, and should Measure Z be spent towards Ward 6 or generally for parks and libraries?
We have the Orlando Library, which it's about 10 years old.
Right.
We do need another park. It's a matter of finding the space for the park. I don't have any city-owned land within my ward, but that doesn't mean that we say, gee, we give up. We need to be looking at a partnership and being creative in a way to find a location for another park within Ward 6.
Does Measure Z play into that?
I hope it does,
Okay.
and I want to see how that plays out.
I want to talk about an issue that has implications not just in Riverside, but throughout the state and the country. As you know, the new administration in Washington has taken some very strong positions as it relates to immigration and deportation. Now, we know that the city of Riverside does not enforce federal immigration laws. Most cities in California take the same position. But we also know that the city of Riverside has not specifically come out with a statement that it is a sanctuary city, whatever that means. I don't want to get caught up in semantics.
Right.
Safe haven, safe zone, welcoming together, hasn't done that. Your opponent, who's not here right now, has been very strong on the view that Riverside should make an affirmative statement as it relates to, let's call it, safe zones. What do you make of this debate over, broadly speaking, the sanctuary city question?
There's been plenty of talk over the last couple of months, but what hasn't been talked about enough, and maybe we should have done a better job educating the public. There's a lot of rhetoric going out there, but we have a city policy, and at no time has anybody held up that city policy and said, this is no good, it's out of date. The police department has a policy when it comes to dealing with foreign nationals. And that policy, it specifically states that they do not go out and enforce immigration law because they are there to build a partnership with the community. They want to have that interaction with them. They want to be trusted. That policy talks about not asking about citizenship. There is no secret database regarding citizenship, religion, asking for what their current immigration status or where they're from. But it also talks about, but there's also a need that you treat everybody the same. We want safe neighborhoods. We want people to feel safe in their neighborhoods so they can live with their families and feel good about themselves and have a good life. Where the policy also talks about when cooperating with the federal authorities, it's very specific about dangerous, serious, or dangerous individuals. And regardless of who you are or where you're from, if you commit a violent crime in this city, you need to be held accountable.
But let me ask you though, because the administration in Washington has spoken very clearly, and despite some federal court decisions that may have come or may come in the future, we know that the Trump administration would like to withhold funds from government entities that don't cooperate. What a lack of cooperation means, I don't know how they will define it. But how far does Riverside go if the Trump administration stands by their word that they will start cutting federal funds if cities don't cooperate, however they may define it?
It's a discussion that we would need to have, with, of course, with our legal counsel. It's also my understanding very recently there is a federal judge
Yes.
who has ruled that you can't withhold those funds, because I think there's a degree of perception and definition on how that would apply to
A
individual
nexus.
states. There you go.
So what about the overall mood, though? I can tell you're tan, and that means you're walking your precincts.
Yes, it does.
And so you are blessed with a tremendously diverse
Yes, I am.
ward with a significant number of folks that may be of Latino descent. And I don't know their status, but I do know in speaking with folks throughout California, they're scared. Even if they're documented, they're scared. Their aunt maybe lacked documentation. Their cousin was brought here when they were 3.
Right.
And so, have you heard those fears? And if you've heard them, what do you say?
I've heard some frustration, and the one thing that I want to be very clear on, I do have a very diverse population within my ward. Regardless of who you are, if you call my office looking for help, you're going to get it. I've never asked
Right.
anyone where they're from, and that doesn't matter when it comes to providing services as a councilman. We do hear a little frustration from time to time. Earlier this year, we participated in a couple of meetings, one at the Queen of Angels, one at Norte Vista High School. We actually brought the police chief out, and the police chief gave a presentation, and the little bit of anxiety that was there at the beginning of the meeting quickly dissipated at the end when they were able to hear from him speaking Spanish on the direction his department was going to go and the actions they would or would not take.
I would think it's fair to say that the Inland Empire and the city of Riverside have a love-hate relationship with warehouses. Warehouses have brought a lot of jobs to this region, some high-paying, some low-paying, some full-time, some part-time. This region has a lot of empty space, and the reality is the warehousing logistics industry, they like the Inland Empire.
Right.
Easy access from the port. There have been votes recently on warehouses.
Yes.
One pretty controversial because a warehouse was apparently going to butt up against a neighborhood. Some were surprised that you voted in favor of that warehouse. I don't believe it was in your ward.
No.
But some were surprised that you voted in favor of that warehouse, given what is perceived to be your very neighborhood focus.
Yes.
What made you decide to vote in favor of that particular warehouse that was coming up against a neighborhood? And then we'll talk more broadly.
Sure. You know, that was a tough decision. That was one of the tougher votes that I've cast in the 3 years that I've been on the council. There is a number of things that went through my mind because the reports, the EIR reports were probably thousands of pages
the
long.
environmental reports.
You know, it stems back to the history of the property there. The property owners have owned that property since probably the mid-70s. I think my understanding is in order to allow warehouses to be built, which started many years ago, they had to dedicate some land for a park that's out there at this particular moment. And that started the building of warehouses out there. This individual warehouse, 1 million square feet, would take up 17 different parcels. So theoretically, you could end up with 17 different buildings there. You could end up with multiple buildings, I think, with the same amount of square footage. There was a lot of work, I think, that was done to kind of ease some of the issues. Mitigate the issues. You know, the back of the warehouse, they gated off the back roadway to where it could only be used for public safety purposes.
This warehouse is in Ward 2, which is Mr. Melendrez's ward.
Yes.
He voted against, correct?
Correct.
So the question becomes, how much deference should a council member give to the views of the sitting council member who would be most impacted? So, you know, one could argue if Mr. Melendrez opposed, maybe the rest of the council should have sided with Mr. Melendrez.
that's always a strong consideration of what the council, and that happens most of the time. It doesn't
Right.
always happen. I guess the bottom line is I can sit here and probably talk for 20 minutes on the reasoning for my vote, but when it comes right down to it, it comes down to jobs.
Right.
It came down to quality jobs. There was Fortune 100 companies that were looking at that, and I know if it turns out that the quality employer turns out, the Fortune 100 company shows up there, it turns out to be a great vote. If it turns out to be an empty warehouse, that's obviously an issue. But I was convinced that steps were being taken to bring a good employer who would pay good wages, and that's something we need as job growth and good jobs for this
So
community.
let's talk more about jobs. What steps will you take, presuming re-election, to diversify the local economy, to create high-wage jobs? And how would you turn to our 3 top-class universities to help, or 4, I guess, what is it? UCR, La Sierra, Cal Baptist, and, well, RCC as well, but Cal State San Bernardino, a lot of great universities in this region to help build upon the economy.
We all have to be inclusive and working together on this. We need to do our best to recruit, retain, and expand current businesses here. We've done a good job. There's 2 major employers that we've been able to bring in the last 2 years. One is CARB, the other is UC Pathways. Another good example on this side of town on a business that is expanding is UTC Aerospace, located right around the corner from here. Because in the last 4 years, they've expanded their workforce by about 500 employees, which I think is good news for this side of town because it is a company where you can get hired at the bottom level and move to management. There's a college, they provide college courses there, and I think that's an outstanding opportunity for this surrounding neighborhood to have access to a community employer who could possibly, at the same time, provide a college education.
Riverside defines itself, labels itself, calls itself the city of arts and innovation. What does that mean to you? What does that moniker mean? And presuming you're a fan of that moniker, what do you plan to do in a second term to continue to have the city live up to the view that it's the city of arts and innovation?
We need to be creative. We can never settle for something saying we're done here, it's time to move on to something. We need to be creative and constantly be reviewing everything we're doing, whether it be job growth, IT, education. We need to be looking at better ways to be providing customer service to our community.
Do we need another Renaissance, which was a plan from the last decade that brought about a lot of this art and innovation?
I think we're good where we're sitting at right now, but we need to be looking to the future as opposed to looking behind us, because I think a lot of good things were put in place. Now it's a matter of expanding when there's the will and able to do so.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting, tricky question, but I think you're up to the task. Riverside's a pretty terrific place.
Yes,
It's a
it
pretty
is.
good place to live, I think most would say. Our friends in San Bernardino have had a real tough time, but Riverside's weathered pretty darn well. But how would you take Riverside from goodness to greatness?
Well, take a look at a couple things we've done over the last couple of years. Let's use the last 2 years as an example. We had the retirement of a city manager.
Right.
And at that point, the entire council individually, collectively knew we had to go in a different direction. And that's what we did with the hiring of our new city manager and our new city attorney. And I'm glad to say at the time I was the mayor pro tem. And we started, and the one thing I kept hearing is we started that recruitment in October of 2014. And I kept hearing, you're going to have to do this recruitment a couple times probably for both those positions. We were determined. We got good candidates, and we had them, and I was able to facilitate that process. We had them both signed to contracts in January of 2015. They both started in May, but we were able to get through that process in 3 months. A lot has changed. This council has made some really great decisions regarding finances, how we do business. You look at the way we're doing transparency now. I think many cities can take an example from us. We have the Sunshine Act where we're posting our agendas 12 days in advance. We're retooling the whole building process method where basically you can go on one floor, get what you need. The process is being streamlined to get people through it in weeks as opposed to months. Computronics is an electronic version that's going to allow people to do their permitting process online and have dashboards to be able to track that as it goes across the board. All of that will be in process by September. We haven't been afraid to look at our finances at the same time. Look, we're auditing every single department. Every year we're auditing 3 different departments for finances and performance-related issues. There's not a lot of cities who are willing to do that, to take a hard, solid look on how we're doing business and how we're going to approach it. You know, sometimes we get some talk or criticism about deficits and our debt, but we're also one of the few cities that's taken that head on in a forthright manner. Not that there's been anything illegal done, but I think if other cities took the steps we've taken to dive into our finances and how we do things, I'm not sure there'd be very many people following us.
In our final moments, why do you want to run for re-election? Why are you running for re-election?
I want to make a difference in this. I want to continue making a difference in this ward. I promised people when I was elected 4 years ago that I'd be available, I'd be accessible, I'd be proactive. I stay in this community on a weekly basis. I drive all of my neighborhoods on a weekly basis. Sometimes I get out and I walk neighborhoods looking for issues because what I want to do is solve the problem before I get a phone call. And it's just not election time where I've gone out and knocked on doors. During the course of the last 3 years, many times my field representative, I would take a couple hours and we just go out and knock on doors, tell them City Hall's here and how can we help you. Quality of life. I need to make sure that this ward is clean, it's safe, it's well maintained. We've done wonders. We've done a lot of great work. We've reduced graffiti in this neighborhood. One of the biggest complaints I had 4 years ago was the amount of graffiti. And in December of 2013, through the 311 system, we had 900 calls for graffiti cleanup. Our goal was to get that under 100. We did that last October.
I'd like to offer you the opportunity to close by speaking to your voters right into camera.
It's been an honor to serve every single one of you. I am here to serve you. I work this job 24 hours a day. I'm not complaining about the long hours. I like representing you. Public service is what I'm all about, and that's what I will continue to be. That's all I've ever known in my entire life as a police officer and now as an elected official. I want to continue to represent you to the very best of my ability and make sure that you have the resources to have a great quality of life. And often, people who know me will hear this phrase, it's not all about me, there's not about an I or a me, it's about we. All of us working together collectively as one to improve our quality of life and take the small piece of the earth that we live on and make it the best that it can be.
His name is Jim Perry. He is running for re-election to Ward 6 in the city of Riverside. His opponent is Rafael Elizalde. He had agreed to participate in this forum. He canceled moments before the forum began. We thank Mr. Perry for joining us. We also would like to thank the sponsors of these Raincross Riverside City Debates. They are the Raincross Group, the Press Enterprise, the PIC Group, and Charter Communications. Please remember that this election is all mail-in. You cannot go to the polls. You must mail in your ballot. Those ballots must be marked by June 6th. That's a postmark. If you don't make it in time, you can drop off your ballot at designated sites. Don't forget to vote. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for joining us for the 2017 Riverside Raincross City Election Debates. Thank you.